The Vampire Hunter Who Almost Killed Me is not just another vampire tale, it's a confession, a warning, and a haunting reflection on what it means to live forever. Step into 1834 Salem, Massachusetts, a city built on whispers of witches and shadows that never sleep. One man's last sunset becomes the dawn of an eternal curse. Bitten by the enigmatic vampire Elias, our narrator is cast into a world of bloodlust, silence, and endless night. But Salem is not a city that tolerates monsters. It births hunters. On one fog-laden night, predator meets pursuer. The cemetery becomes a battlefield, a clash of fang against steel, hunger against conviction, and when the dust settles, only one truth remains: there is no victory for the damned. This isn't just a story about vampires and hunters. It's about us, about how fleeting life gives meaning to every moment, about why mortality is a gift, not a curse. If you've ever wondered what immortality truly costs, or if you've ever taken a sunset for granted, this story will change how you see both. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more immersive Gothic stories and dark reflections on life, death, and everything in between. Imagine this: you're standing on a quiet street as the last rays of the sun bleed into the horizon. The air is crisp, the world is peaceful, and you believe with absolute certainty that tomorrow will greet you the same as today. But what if that sunset were your last? What if the world you thought was eternal for you suddenly closed its doors forever? That's what happened to me. October 17th, 1834. Salem, Massachusetts. That date is etched into me like a scar that never heals. On that evening, the world gave me a gift not of life, but of eternity. And let me tell you, eternity is no gift. It's a chain, a prison draped in shadows. Even now, centuries later, I can still smell that evening. The air was thick with salt from the Atlantic, smoke curling from wooden chimneys, and the faint sweetness of spices that sailors carried from across the seas. Salem was alive with commerce and mystery, a place where history and myth walked hand in hand. I remember watching the sunset turn the ocean copper. My mortal self thought I would see such beauty every day of my life. How foolish! That was the last sun my eyes ever touched, the last warmth that kissed my skin. From that night onward, I was bound to the cold. And here's the lesson I wish someone had told me back then. We rarely know when we're living our last ordinary moment. A meal with friends, a sunset, even a careless laugh, these moments vanish, replaced by silence before you realize they were final. So tonight, as you listen, don't just hear a story of monsters and hunters. Hear a warning from someone who lost the simplest joys forever. Because sometimes, the real horror isn't claws or fangs, it's the memory of the light you'll never see again. The streets of Salem were narrow, lined with colonial houses that had seen centuries pass. Their windows flickered with lamplight, and their shadows stretched long, golden, and fragile. If you've ever walked through an old town at dusk, you'll know the feeling, like the air itself carries secrets, like the walls whisper, if you just stand still long enough. That evening, I stopped in front of Charter Street Cemetery. Its 17th century gravestones leaned like weary old men, their carved skulls and angel wings faded by time. Twilight painted them in molten gold, as if the sun wanted to read their secrets one last time before slipping away. It felt like any other evening, but my heart sensed something was different. The church bell tolled, and with it came a chill that sliced through my skin. At the time, I thought it was simply autumn. Looking back, I know it was the whisper of fate. Salem has always been a city of burdens, witch trials, whispered curses, restless spirits. If you walk its alleys at night, you feel the weight of centuries pressing down on you. On October 17th, I didn't know I was walking not into night, but into eternity. This was my farewell to mortality, though I didn't know it then. When I speak of it now, I see parallels to moments in ordinary life. Think of when someone unknowingly closes a door for the last time, kisses a loved one before parting ways, or leaves a house they'll never return to. We rarely realize the gravity of those moments as they happen, and that, I think, is the cruelty of time. My farewell wasn't peaceful. It was violent, sudden, unforgettable. But for a moment sitting before those gravestones with dusk settling like a veil, I felt a peace I would never know again. The sun was gone. Night swallowed the sky like a predator, and with it came silence. That's when I saw him. He walked the empty street as though he belonged to another age, a tall figure in a long, dark coat, its high collar hiding much of his face. But his eyes betrayed him. They glowed like amber flames, still and piercing, as if they could strip the soul bare. I froze. I should have fled, but something stronger held me fascination. His presence was gravity. I couldn't escape, even if I wanted to. His hair was black, falling to his shoulders in straight strands untouched by time. His skin, pale as marble, reflected the moonlight with a natural brilliance. No wrinkle, no blemish, nothing human. Only eternity carved into a form, too perfect to be mortal. He stepped closer, and when he spoke, his voice was a whisper dripping with venom and allure. Elias. That was the name he gave me. Whether it was his true name, I'll never know. Vampires change names, like others change coats. Here's something I've learned about predators: they never ask permission. Lions don't seek consent from deer. Sharks don't politely request fish to surrender. And Elias was no different. His cold hand gripped my face, and before I could speak, his fangs sank into my flesh. The bite was not just pain, it was fire. My blood erupted in my veins, molten lava consuming me from within. I writhed, silent screams tearing through me. And then a voice, Elias's voice, echoing in my mind, "The sun no longer belongs to you." Those words were my epitaph as a man. When I awoke, I was no longer human. My heart was still, my senses impossibly sharp. The air smelled of iron and damp earth. My hunger roared like a beast I couldn't silence. And Elias, he was gone. Vampires never stay. They pass through lives like storms, leaving ruin and silence behind. That was the night my tomb was sealed, even as my new birth began. And I ask you, have you ever had a moment where one decision, one encounter, split your life into before and after? It might not be as violent as mine. It could be meeting someone, losing someone, moving to a new city, or surviving a close call. But in that moment, you're no longer the same. A line is drawn. On one side, the person you were. On the other, someone unrecognizable. For me, that line was drawn in blood. Immortality. The word sounds glorious, doesn't it? To live beyond death, to see centuries pass, to outlast empires. But here is the truth. Immortality is not life extended. It is life corrupted. In those first nights, I discovered the cruelty of my new existence. Hunger ruled me, not the soft pang of missing a meal, but a violent craving that roared in my chest until I could think of nothing else. It was thirst sharpened into madness, a craving that only blood could silence. I haunted the edges of Salem, a stray dog, hiding in shadows. The Charter Street Cemetery, once a quiet place for contemplation, became my hunting ground. Drunken sailors stumbling from the harbor, travelers who had lost their way in the fog, they became my sustenance. My hands shook when I fed, not from pity, but from shame. And yet, the irony, every time I drank, I felt more alive than I had as a man. Colors sharpened, scents became symphonies. Even the flutter of a moth's wings struck my ears like thunder. I was a predator perfected, but that perfection came with chains. The sun was my executioner. Even a hint of dawn burned my flesh like molten iron. Each morning I hid, burrowed in darkness, afraid the first ray of light might end me. Have you ever had a dream turn to ash in your mouth? A promotion, a relationship, a goal that looked beautiful from afar, but devoured you once you reached it. That was immortality for me. From a distance, it gleamed like a jewel. Up close, it was rusted iron shackles. What struck me most was the silence. No heartbeat, no warmth in my chest, just emptiness where once I carried laughter, love, and the fragile rhythm of being alive. I tell you this because many chase eternity. They imagine it's freedom. But true eternity is repetition. More nights, more blood, more silence. A prison not with walls, but with time itself. At first, I believed Salem had accepted me, The city of witches and whispered curses seemed to cradle my shadow. But Salem does not tolerate monsters. It never has. The signs came slowly, mist curling thicker than usual, clinging to the gravestones as though alive. Footsteps doubling mine when no one walked behind me. The scent of iron and gunpowder drifting on the breeze, not from hearts, but from weapons being readied. I began to feel watched, not by the dead whose names were carved in stone, but by something patient, something hunting me. The cemetery, once my sanctuary, turned into a cage. I would step among the graves, and the silence would sharpen into a blade at my back. The crack of a twig, the scrape of metal, these were not accidents. They were signals. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia. But vampires know better. Predators recognize the presence of other predators, and this one was human. Imagine walking through your own home and suddenly realizing the walls are listening. That was Salem to me. Every alley, every shadow whispered not comfort, but pursuit. And then came the whispers not in my head, but behind me in the streets, low, measured, as though someone knew my story, my crimes, my birth into darkness. I could not catch them, but I felt them coil around me like a noose. That's when I understood. Salem breeds its own ghosts, but it also breeds hunters. Where there are monsters, there are those sworn to end them. The night he finally revealed himself was smothered by fog, thick as wool. I prowled the cemetery, certain I was not alone. Then came the growl of a dog, deep and low, not the stray bark of hunger, but the warning of a companion trained to track death itself. And then I heard it, a voice, firm and cold as steel. I have found you. He stepped from behind the gravestones, a silhouette at first, then a man in full. A heavy leather coat wrapped him, collar raised against the chill. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his features, but not his eyes. Those eyes glinted like blades, unbreakable, unwavering. In one hand, he carried a stake of dark wood, carved with symbols I recognized from old grimoires. In the other, a firearm gleamed faintly, its chamber smelling of iron and gunpowder. The very air recoiled around him, heavy with intent. He was no amateur. His movements were deliberate, each step the product of years of training. His voice carried knowledge. They say you were first seen in 1834, a ship that never returned, a man who vanished from daylight. Salem remembers its shadows. He knew me. He had studied me. This was not chance. This was a verdict. The stake in his hand bore names carved deep into the grain, names of others like me, vampires whose eternities he had ended. The weapon was not just wood, it was history. For a moment, I hesitated. He was mortal, and yet, in his stance, I saw no fear, only conviction, the conviction of a man who has made peace with death. The fog curled around us, as if the night itself wanted no part in what was about to unfold. And then I realized something. This was not just a hunter. This was Salem itself, given flesh and blade, come to claim the monster it had birthed. The cemetery held its breath. Gravestones stood like silent witnesses, watching as predator and hunter locked eyes. He lifted his stake. I bared my fangs, and for a heartbeat, eternity paused. Then the world shattered. The hunter moved first, faster than I thought a mortal could. His stake whistled through the air, missing my heart by inches, and the impact against my chest sent a guttural roar tearing from my throat. Before the echo faded, his gun fired, the thunder rolling across the graves. The bullet tore into me, burning as if fire itself had been poured into my veins. It was no ordinary lead, it was steeped in holy water, sanctified by rituals I had thought long forgotten. My body staggered, smoke curling from the wound. Pain became fury. I lunged, my hand clamping onto his arm, muscles straining to rip the stake from his grasp. But he moved with precision born of practice, not panic. A kick slammed into my ribs, bones splintering with sharp cracks that echoed inside me. Still, I did not fall. Hunger drove me. Rage fueled me. My senses exploded. Every heartbeat of his chest, every drop of blood rushing through his veins was a drum, summoning me to slaughter. This was not a battle of equals. It was a clash of inevitabilities. He was mortal, destined to die. I was cursed, destined to kill. And yet, in that fog-choked graveyard, I felt something shift. For the first time since Elias had turned me, I wondered if this mortal might be my end. He drew a blade etched with runes, steel glowing faintly in the moonlight. When he drove it into my side, agony ripped through me, fire bursting from within as if the blade carried the sun itself. I collapsed, face pressed to the cold earth, and for a fleeting moment I thought it would all end there. My ribs shattered, blood pouring hot down my arm. I almost welcomed it an end to silence, to hunger, to the endless cycle of nights. But immortality does not surrender so easily. My body twisted, bones knitting together with grotesque snaps. My jaw lengthened, fangs tearing through my gums as the beast inside me fully awoke. I rose from the earth, not as a man, but as a predator unchained. With a roar that did not belong to this world, I seized him, hurling his body against a gravestone that shattered beneath the impact. Stone dust filled the air, mingling with blood and gunpowder. Even broken, he clutched the stake. Even bleeding, he raised his weapon. His eyes burned with conviction, brighter than any flame. And then frenzy. There was no strategy, no careful calculation, just violence. Flesh against steel, claw against stake, blood against powder. I tasted the metallic tang of my own blood as it mingled with dust, my body driven by instinct alone. He slashed, I lunged. He fired, I tore. We became two forces colliding in the dark, the hunter who refused to fall, the beast who refused to die. If you've ever been in a fight for survival, not metaphorical, but true survival, you know this madness. It is not about winning. It is about outlasting, about clawing through the storm until one is left standing. That was our frenzy. Under the pale gaze of the moon, exhaustion set in. His breaths grew ragged. His hands trembling, he lifted the stake for what he believed would be the final strike. Not fear, never fear, but effort. Sheer human endurance stretched to its breaking point. I saw the weakness. Eternity grants many things, but the greatest advantage of all is this: I do not tire. I seized his arm as he drove the stake downward. Bones cracked in my grip, snapping like dry branches. His cry rang through the cemetery, but he did not beg. His eyes, even in agony, burned with words he didn't need to speak. If not I, another will come. And then instinct consumed me. I bit. His blood surged into me, hot and violent, coursing with fire and sin. It was the taste of victory, but also of damnation. I drank until his eyes dimmed, until the fire that had sustained him flickered out into nothingness. His body fell limp in my grasp, landing among the silent dead. Another corpse, another ghost added to Salem's endless history. The stake rolled across the earth, stained with the blood of so many like me. For a moment, I held it in my hand. I nearly drove it into my own chest, desperate to end the charade of eternity. But I could not. The curse held me tighter than any resolve. The hunter was gone, but his warning lingered. Others would come. They always would. The world does not tolerate monsters, no matter how many victories we claim in the dark. As the horizon paled with dawn's first touch, I fled. The light burned my skin, chasing me into shadows once more. I had survived, but there was no triumph in survival, only the knowledge that the war would never end. And so I remained cursed child of the night, burdened by silence, hunted forever. The cemetery was silent again, not the silence of peace, but the silence after violence, heavy, suffocating, absolute. The hunter's body lay sprawled among shattered gravestones. His hand still clutched the broken stake, his face turned toward the stars he would never see again. I watched him, breathless though I no longer breathed, and for a long moment I felt something strange, envy. He was gone, released. His war ended in the cold earth. Mine, however, continued. The blood I had drunk still burned inside me, a fire coiling through my veins. It gave me strength, yes, but it also left me hollow. For in his blood, I tasted not only his life, but his devotion, his conviction, his unyielding belief that the world must rid itself of me. And here's the bitter truth, he had been right. The stake rolled to my feet, its grain dark with the names of those he had destroyed. Dozens of them, vampires older than me, stronger than me, wiser than me, and yet he had ended them all. For a brief moment, I imagined carving my own name into that wood, pressing the point into my chest, and letting this endless cycle stop. But I couldn't. That is the cruelty of the curse. Death tempts, but eternity demands. And so I remained. The wind swept through the cemetery, scattering leaves across the hunter's still form. It was almost as if Salem itself mourned him, or perhaps it simply waited for the next chapter, for another hunter to rise from the fog, to take his place, to seek me out again. Because that is the truth of this life. Hunters will always come. Monsters will always be hunted, no matter how many I slay, no matter how many dawns I escape. I am never free. So I turned from his body. The sky had begun to pale, the first thin strands of dawn threatening my skin. With the last of my strength, I fled once more into the shadows, not victorious, not triumphant, but condemned to continue. That night, I learned something more terrifying than the bite of Elias, more agonizing than the hunter's blade. There is no victory for the damned, only survival. Centuries have passed since that night, but it has never left me. The cemetery, the fog, the glint of his eyes, they return to me in dreams, in the silence before dawn, in the echo of footsteps behind me that may or may not exist. And I've come to understand something. The hunter was never my enemy, not truly. He was my mirror. He showed me what I had lost: conviction, mortality, the fragile courage of a man who knows his time is short, but chooses to fight anyway. That is something we, the so-called immortals, will never possess. We may live without end, but we live without meaning. For what is eternity when stripped of urgency? What is life when you have no death to measure it by? I know now that his mission was not just to kill me. It was to remind me, and perhaps to remind you, that life is precious because it ends. So here is the lesson I leave you with, the one I wish someone had told me before Elias's bite sealed my fate. Do not waste the ordinary. Do not wait for the last sunset to realize how beautiful the light was. Do not wait for loss to cherish love. Do not wait for silence to hear the value of laughter. I was cursed to live forever, but in that eternity, I lost the very thing that gave life meaning, its brevity. You, however, still have it. Treasure the moments that feel small, because one day they will be the ones you long for most. Hug your loved ones. Watch the sunset with intent. Listen to the heartbeat that drums in your chest and be grateful that it ends, because its ending is what makes it matter. I killed the hunter, yes, but in truth, he saved me. Not from the curse. No one can undo what I am, but from forgetting what it means to be human. And if you remember nothing else from my story, remember this: victory is not in living forever. It is in living fully. Well, you still can.